Boa tarde, meu nome é Denise, tenho 15 anos. Sou de Moçambique, residente em Inhambane, uma província ao sul do país. Wiane, é assim que se dão as boas-vindas na minha língua local.
Good afternoon. My name is Denisia. I'm 15 years old. I come from Mozambique in Inhambane province, the south of the country. Uyani, that's how you say hello and welcome in my local language.
Eu sou ativista e gosto de exercer esta função porque me permite ajudar muitas crianças na minha comunidade.
I'm a social activist and I enjoy doing this function because it helps me help a lot of children within my community.
Estudar é meu maior interesse, pois no futuro pretendo ser advogada.
Studying is my main concern because in future I intend on being a lawyer.
Obrigada.
And thank you.
Phong An, would you like to go next?
Yes. Hi, I'm Phương Anh, a youth activist from Vietnam. I'm passionate about gender justice and equality for girls in education. That's also the reason why I'm learning to be a teacher. Thank you for having me in this huge event.
Hi, I'm Mayella. I'm the youth delegate from Australia. I'm really passionate about education and freedom for young women and girls. Before continuing, I'd like to quickly acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I am presenting from today, and extend that respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and invite all of you watching to reflect on the land on which you stand.
Good morning, everyone. From Brazil, I am Gisela Foz, an activist and lawyer. I am also a young leader from the Should Sides movement and country coordinator of the International Youth Alliance for Family Planning. If there's any project to impact girls and women's lives, you can count on me. I am honored to be your moderator for today's event, and I am beyond happy to introduce the representative of our co-sponsor Government of Australia, the Australian Ambassador for Gender Equality, Her Excellency Ambassador Julianne Guevara, for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Gisela. And I too, from Australia, would like to pay my respects to the Indigenous people of the land on which I am presenting from today, which actually this evening in Canberra, the Ngunnawal people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging as well. This is a particularly proud moment for me because I was, of course, nominated as Australia's first female Indigenous ambassador some years ago now, when I took up a position in Spain. So my role, obviously, as the Ambassador for Gender Equality is really to ensure gender equality and empowerment of women and girls is a really central focus for Australia's diplomatic development and regional security efforts. So it is a job where I advocate internationally for women's equal participation in politics, in economics and social affairs. It's really to advance global development, peace and stability by promoting gender equality. And we see the work of organizations like Plan International and of having, of course, youth delegates that we have here with us this evening as a really important voice in some of the very big issues and challenges facing the world right now. I wanted to begin particularly by thanking Plan International and the youth delegates for the launch of the two reports, which will be discussed this evening. Obviously, Halting Lives, the impact of COVID-19 on girls and young women, and of course, the finalizing of a better normal, the girls' call for a revolutionary reset, are really, really timely contributions in terms of, hearing young women's voices during this pandemic. I mean, obviously, I think both reports will be really useful for readers when we're looking, obviously, for evidence-based research and analysis on the topic of how are girls actually impacted, by this current pandemic. You know, we've all heard the international media reporting, of course, that this COVID-19 is having a disproportionate impact on women and girls. But I think it's important, obviously, to hear specifically how it is impacting on the lives of young women and girls. Obviously, we know this is not, it's beyond a health pandemic. This is having economic and social impacts as well. And I think one of the things I was reading, obviously, your reports prior to this particular webinar, and the types of issues that you have identified, you know, are very common global challenges. And I think that is something, you know, really that we have to come to terms with. So when we're looking at, you know, what has happened to the situation with spikes in gender-based violence, when we look at, you know, the situation of girls not being able to participate in education, when we've seen impacts in terms of their access to healthcare, these are not issues that are confined to one area of the globe. These are sort of issues that have clearly disrupted the lives of young women, you know, right across the globe. The social impacts that you've picked up on in your reports as well around, you know, some of the mental health issues that have been identified. And these are things that I think are a real challenge, both for civil society, but also for governments to come to terms with as well. And certainly the Australian government is very committed to working with civil society in trying to address some of these issues. Since the start of COVID-19, the Australian government has responded to the needs of women and girls, particularly in our region, in looking to try and identify gender responsive approaches to our COVID-19 response, but also recovery efforts in the longer term. We have a policy that the Minister for Foreign Affairs introduced in May. So Minister Payne, she introduced what is called Partnerships for Recovery, which is a package of specific efforts designed to assist particularly countries in our region in managing the economic, health and social impacts of COVID-19. We've looked at particularly trying to increase our efforts on preventing and also providing services to people who have been survivors of gender-based violence at this particular time, to ensure that there's the continuation of essential services, particularly in the health sphere and education, as I've mentioned before. But also a lot of work is being done by Australia on ensuring that we continue to protect human rights at this particular time as well, when we can see you know, definite pressures on you know, the space that's available for civil society to respond to this crisis as well. Obviously, yes, our engagement, I think, is with young women is a really significant thing. A lot of the rapid assessment work that has been done looking specifically at the impacts of COVID-19 have really focused on women. But I think, you know, these types of conversations that we're having tonight, sort of looking at the intergenerational impacts of a life-changing crisis such as this are really very, very important. And so, you know, I really am looking forward to hearing your presentations this evening. I mean, we will, of course, as Australia, continue our work to support women in the region. We have programs like Pacific Girl, which tries to help young women in our region, ensuring that they continue with their schooling. We also have a Global Partnerships for Education program, which ensures that, you know, we've had 41 million more girls enrolled because of that particular program that we've been involved in for a number of years. And we're involved in programs like the World YWCA Rise Up program, which really supports young women and empowers them to advocate and engage on issues, including gender equality, which I think, you know, you are all doing by being involved in an event like this tonight as well. So I really want to, while I think there's many, many challenges, and I've talked about a few of them, what I really wanted to stress maybe in conclusion is, although this pandemic is obviously creating challenges, it is a really important opportunity for us to be thinking about how we build better societies, you know, how we build back better after this particular event. I think it's really important for us to be understanding how different segments of society, help contribute to the Build Back Better. And so it's really an opportunity, I think, for us to reconstruct systems and norms on gender equality to help us advance gender equality. And that really, it requires us to be listening to you all. So I really feel like I should stop there because if we're going to start this process of building back better, I want to hear from, basically the future generation, for this planet. So thank you very much for letting me join your event this evening or this morning. And yes, I look forward to hearing your presentations. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your presence and remarks. We will now move on to our first panel, where we hear from our panelists about the research outcomes. Plan International has completed 2 pieces of global research with the impacts of COVID-19 on the lives of girls and women. The first of these is called Halting Lives and is the result of research in 14 countries on the impacts of COVID-19. The second, it's called A Better Normal, and this research was co-developed by some of the girls that, for our luck, are here with us today. This research surveys girls on the opportunities for building back, not just a new, but a better post-COVID world. So I will start with Cynthia Betty, the Country Director for Plan International Brazil. Cynthia, can you outline some of the main findings of the research on the impact of COVID-19 on girls' lives?
Yes, thank you very much, Gisela. Thank you everyone for joining our discussion today. I'm happy to share the findings with you of our global report in Halting Lives, the impact of COVID-19 on girls and young women. First, I would like to set the scene. As cases continue to spread, it has become clear that the outbreak of this virus has implications that reach far beyond the direct impact on people's physical health. We know that disease outbreaks affect girls and boys, women and men differently, and it is fundamental in understanding the primary and secondary effects that this health emergency will have on individuals and communities. We know the poorest and most marginalized households are disproportionately affected, especially girls and women. Pre-existing inequalities are being made worse by COVID-19. With this in mind, we as Plan International, in line with our continued focus on gender equality and girls' rights, undertook research to look specifically at the impact of COVID-19 on girls and young women, collecting data from over 7,000 girls and young women across 14 countries, which include Brazil, Spain, Australia, Vietnam, India, Mozambique, and Ethiopia. We found that coronavirus has greatly affected the lives of the girls and young women we spoke to. Over 80% of the girls and young women answering the survey said that the virus containment measures had caused a change in their lives that ranged from moderate to major change. When asked about the negative effects that they experienced as a result of the pandemic, the most frequent effects cited by the girls and young women across the 14 countries were not being able to go to school or university, not being able to socialize with friends, not being able to leave the house regularly. Given that not going to school or university was cited by the most girls and young women, it demonstrates how important education is for them. Because of this, school closures will have long-term impacts on girls and young women's education opportunities. The loss of even 6 months of education because of COVID-19 will have a greater impact on girls in low and lower middle income countries. If girls drop out because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it will be very difficult for them to return. This is especially true for girls and young women from poorer and marginalized families, as education becomes unaffordable due to economic hardship. Of those girls that could not physically attend school, but were able to continue to their education, 52% continue their studies via online resources, such as educational websites, online classes, and YouTube videos. 37% practice self-led learning with books and other non-digital materials. 29% use mobile applications. When asked about how COVID-19 had impacted other aspects of their health and well-being, girls and young women said that as far as their sexual reproductive health and rights were concerned, they most frequently consulted social media and internet sites at 42% for both as opposed to parents, teachers, or health clinics. Taking the findings of self-learning using online resources and mobile applications together with the findings of use of social media and the internet for sexual reproductive health and rights information demonstrates the importance that the online world has for girls and young women. Currently, only 1 in 5 people in lower middle countries are connected, and internet penetration rates are higher for men and boys than women and girls. We needed to close this gap, or we risk girls and women falling further behind. In fact, the survey found that 74% of girls and young women said their social media usage had increased since the beginning of the pandemic. These finds also pointed to the risk associated with online use, as 59% of this survey responses pointed to certain negative impacts that arose from this increased usage, such as spending too much time online, seeing more fake news, feeling stressed by the amount of news about the virus on social media. Linked to the findings that girls and young women were feeling stressed from the amount of news related to the virus, the survey results showed the scale of the issue. 80% of the girls and young women had experienced some levels of anxiety ranging between high and moderate levels. We also found a correlation between lower levels of income and levels of anxiety. With this in mind, governments must provide counseling and increase mental health services and recognize psychological impact of the pandemic, particularly on girls and young women. Another significant finding on the effects of the pandemic was that the majority of the girls and young women surveyed had no income of their own. 37% accessed income through another household member. 31% were unemployed with no access to income, and 20% were working. We needed to target measures to protect and support young women's economic security, including access to training and skills development, childcare, and flexible working. Linked to the issue of income, the girls and young women indicated concern about the implications COVID-19 would have on their plans for the future. 33% thought COVID would affect their future employment opportunities. 25% said it would affect their future income. 19% responded that they would have to put their education temporarily on hold. To conclude, this research has highlighted some of the critical challenges girls and young women are facing in light of COVID-19. We needed to prioritize those most in need. We should transition to a new, more sustainable, climate-responsive, and gender-equal future focused on girls in all their diversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was amazing. And for the next question, I would like to call Denisia, the youth delegate for Mozambique. Denisia, can you outline the impacts that COVID-19 has had in your community and your top recommendations for decision makers?
A Covid tem um impacto bastante negativo na minha vida e na comunidade onde vivo.
COVID has had a very negative impact on my life and the community where I live.
Com o encerramento das escolas, as aulas prosseguem remotamente com recursos a fichas de apoio, mas nem todas as raparigas têm acesso às fichas e muito menos às plataformas eletrônicas digitais.
With the closure of schools, classes continue remotely using support forms, but not all the girls have access to forms, much less on digital electronic platforms.
Uma vez que é responsabilidade dos pais ou encarregados de educação levantar as fichas nas escolas, uma vez que é responsabilidade dos pais ou encarregados de educação levantar as fichas nas escolas e nem todos os pais têm esta consciência, isso acaba dificultando o acesso das raparigas à educação.
Since it's the responsibility of parents to go and pick up the forms from school, some parents are not conscious of this responsibility of theirs, and this sometimes affects the education of these girls with not having access to school.
Durante o estado de emergência, devido à COVID-19, muitas raparigas na minha comunidade passam mais tempo a fazer trabalhos domésticos, o que as impede de continuar com os estudos à distância.
During the COVID-19 state of emergency, most girls were spending more time doing house chores, and this was basically impeding them from continuing with some of their distance learning.
Gostaria de apelar aos países para apoiarem mais as organizações de desenvolvimento e humanitárias que nos têm apoiado com materiais de estudo gratuitos e providenciarem oportunidades para as raparigas terem mais acesso às plataformas de estudo eletrônicos digitais.
I would like to call on countries to be able to further support the development and humanitarian organizations that have supported us with free study materials, in terms of also being able to help with digital platforms for young girls to have the opportunity to study.
Para finalizar, a educação da rapariga é muito importante, pois costuma-se dizer, educar uma rapariga é educar um país inteiro. Tendo em conta a pandemia da COVID-19, é necessário que os líderes mundiais pensem em estratégias para garantir o retorno e a retenção da rapariga na escola. Esta é a minha humilde recomendação.
Lastly, education for the young girl is very important. And they usually say, educating a young girl is educating a whole country. Taking into account the COVID-19 pandemic, it is necessary that the world leaders think about strategies to guarantee the return and the retention of the girl in school. This is my humble recommendation.
Obrigada.
Obrigada, Denisia. Thank you very much for pointing out all the situation that we're going through. And you heard the girl. So for our last question for this panel is to Mayela, the youth delegate from Australia. And now we are turning to the other research, which in many ways paints a more positive picture. So Mayela, can you outline the key messages that girls are relying when it comes to building back from COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Gisela. The Better Normal Girls Call for a Revolutionary Reset report was inspired by the idea that COVID-19 could be used as a unique opportunity to create lasting change in societal structure. The pre-COVID world undeniably failed women and young girls, and we believe that this is a chance to push for change in creating a more just and sustainable world. The foundation of our research was to listen to those most affected by COVID, amplifying the voices of girls and young women, listening to their experiences and calls for change. The research report was led by youth delegates in Australia and Vietnam. We created the research question, collected and analyzed data, and authored the report and recommendations. We mapped out our vision for a better normal and reached out to girls and young women across the world to consider their opinions regarding this vision. we engaged with young people across 99 different countries. The vision created is one that is aspirational but achievable. A better normal where girls feel valued and heard, where gender inequity that restricts women is addressed. A better normal where girls are included in leadership and policy making, centering their voices, experiences, and solutions on the issues that affect them. A transformation of the education system and a world where we deliver on climate justice. The report maps out all of these recommendations under 6 pillars, spanning from gender justice to freedom to be human, to inclusivity and equality and power. Girls and young women have mapped out the key changes they want to see enacted by power holders. They have the solutions. One of the key messages girls relayed during the report is inclusion and equality and power. A focus on girls' role in leadership and policy creation and addressing gender inequities at every level. Various recommendations pulled from the report include the ensuring of a gender-sensitive COVID response, including recovery policies and legislation that recognize women and girls' experiences and needs. Governments in particular should take measures to enable and encourage women to take leadership positions in local and higher levels of parliament. Participatory processes for girls in all diversities must be implemented to take advantage of our expertise and ensure our experiences are accurately represented and reflected in solutions co-designed by girls. We want power holders and change makers to ensure that impacts unique to women and young girls are considered in all policy design and decision making. We want to institutionalize processes for all women and girls to participate in decision making, especially emphasizing on laws being co-designed with those affected by the issue at hand. I'd love to invite you as key United Nations body and government officials with the power to instigate this change, to work with us to maximize and enhance these recommendations for our young women into the future.
Thank you very much, Mayela. It's up to us to push the change, right? And it's crucial to put girls at the center of the response. Girls already know what they need. We just need to support them. And to make sure that we're having a real intergenerational dialogue, we brought all these different perspectives to the table. It is clear that we have a lot of work to do in such a short term to respond better to the huge impact that COVID-19 is having across the world. But we should not lose sight of the bigger picture and the opportunity that is presented in building a better normal. It is always inspiring and highly valuable to hear from frontline young activists. You are the ones facing the issues and your voices matter. And now we are moving to some of the world leaders that are leading the responses to COVID-19. And for this panel, I have with me Rina Gelani, Director of Operations from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, and Nadia Malamajid, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children. Rina, would you like to start with your remarks, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to say how thrilled I am to be here with these amazing women that we've just been hearing from, the ambassador, of course, as well. And I want to thank Plan International, the Australian government, and others who really had the foresight to facilitate this research for Halting Lives and the subsequent new normal, which calls for a change. You know, the report, when I was reading it, I really felt the energy that was galvanized around this. I thought the analysis was particularly thoughtful, and the concrete ideas around what I believe is potentially one of the most significant impacts of the COVID pandemic, and that is the impact on the lives of young women and girls. The views of the report resonated. As many of you know, my organization works in countries affected by natural disaster and conflict. And in the countries where I work, girls and young women from Afghanistan to Venezuela, Somalia to Myanmar have basically highlighted the same goals you outlined in the report. You know, everywhere I go, girls and young women speak of the same thing. They want to be heard, they want to be treated equally, to be respected, to go to school, to have access to just basic health, have enough food to feed themselves and their family, to work, and basically to have the same opportunities as their brothers. I was recently in Lebanon after the devastating blast in Beirut, and I spoke to a lot of young women there, but one in particular who had not been to school for several months. You know, she talked about the same thing. She missed her friends, who she basically had said to me were her sanity. She was facing more chores at home because the younger children were also at home. So she was the one providing the support to her mother and her grandmother to care for them. So even if online schooling was available to her, which it was, she wasn't able to focus. So she missed out on education altogether because she was taking on more additional responsibilities. Her family were daily laborers. They, in fact, were refugees across the border from Syria. And they were working day to day, feeding the family based on what they earned that day, and they had lost their income. And so when I asked her and said to her, what are your family talking about doing? She actually said that one of the discussions had been about marrying her, that she would get married so they would have, you know, an additional family support, in a sense, through the extended family to look after her. She's 16 years old. And when I asked her what she thought about this and what she had said that she wanted to do, she said no one had asked me. Now, you know, I'll be highlighting a few issues, if you don't mind, over the next few minutes from the countries that I work in. So they are somewhat the stories about the most vulnerable in the world and the issues that the most vulnerable are facing. But quite frankly, even one girl left behind means that we've not succeeded in our goal of transformative change. Look, as identified by others, it's not a surprise. The actual health consequences of the virus are not what the biggest problem is. It's not what is wreaking havoc. It's precisely the other things. It's the loss of education. It's the closing of businesses that lead to less money for families. It's the lockdowns that lead to crowded spaces and stressful environments. And we've already touched upon some of the results of the consequences of that, an increase in violence. It's the disruption to healthcare that is non-COVID related, but potentially that's more deadly. So let me start with education. Even though 90% of the richer countries have turned to online learning, only 25% of the low-income countries have. And Denisia highlighted, you know, the sheer importance to her of education. And in many of these countries, the online learning is on radio or TV. It's not the sophisticated equipment that those of us in other parts of the world have access to. And I recognize in what Denisia was saying, her demand for access to digital technology. Once schools do open, we know from experience, I mean, the latest was the Ebola outbreak, where we learned that many of those girls who were learning online or not learning at all will never return to school. They will never go back. On healthcare, as we see the world fight to keep up with the consequences of the virus, the health consequences, other health services are being shut down, and that's been referred to. In the countries I work in, maternal conditions are the leading cause for mortality among adolescent women aged 15 to 19. And we're seeing an exponential reduction of maternal and child health care services in these countries, which can only lead to more suffering and death. Poverty, as it has been said, it is again girls who are going to suffer the most. I already referred to child marriage. When families lose income, we see an increase in child marriages. We know that already globally, 1 in 4 girls are married as children. And the United Nations has estimated that 13 million additional child marriages may occur in the next 10 years as a result of the virus. Women are 70% more likely to lose their jobs or have less hours than men in shutdowns being experienced. And of course, we've all heard about the increase in violence. Already 1 in 4 adolescent girls who have partners have experienced violence at their hand. For every 3 months of lockdown, the United Nations estimates 15 million more women will face violence. Now, like the young women in the report, I believe very strongly, like they do, a new normal is needed. The world, and particularly women, young girls, are facing an earthquake. It's shaking things, it's breaking structures, it's challenging how we know the world to be, and we do have choices. The ideas presented by the young women in the report are spot on in my view. They really, really spoke to many of the people who have read that report that I've spoken to since it was released. The United Nations leadership, from the Secretary General to all the leaders in the UN, are calling for the same thing, putting women and girls at the center of recovery. Now, as the report highlighted, and I just want to echo a few that are central to our work, there's a few essential ingredients of the recovery. Firstly, we must tell the story of what's happening. This means sex disaggregated data. I mean, I still find it amazing that when I ask how many women or girls were affected by a certain thing, it is still not a given that I'm going to be able to get the answer. We must have a gender lens to analysis, including those of women with disabilities. Secondly, we must develop solutions with girls, and I think as the women have stated very loudly and clearly, the solutions need to be with women and girls with a seat at the table, including in leadership and real decision-making roles. We must recognize the creativity of young women and girls, their innovation, and shape effective partnerships with them and identify solutions and response. Thirdly, we must ensure young women have accurate information and access to services, including for violence. And fourthly, we need to put cash in the hands of young women and families, ensuring social protection expands to capture women and girls. For the countries I work in, this will require money. We have, as humanitarian organizations globally, sought to help the most vulnerable people in 63 low-income and middle-income countries. We've only received about 24% of the money required for the programs that we need to do. And what's more even shocking is that the programs that are trying to reach women and girls, such as gender-based violence programs, are only 7% funded. So the world hasn't yet caught up with, I think, the young women in the report that recognize that we really, really need to put action where the words are. All too often, we just identify the problems. What I really appreciated in a new normal, you've taken hold of opportunities that present. The world needs more of this. It needs ideas and solutions. As the Secretary General has stated, recognizing the impact on women and girls, this is our opportunity to reset the current system, to build a more equitable world that is just and protects our environment for generations to come. It's not too late. And in fact, as the insightful young women of the new normal have said, I truly believe with them, we can have a revolutionary reset. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rina. That was really inspiring. And also what you pointed out about the child marriage, I learned with Plan International Brazil that why don't we reflect that child marriage is not the answer for hunger, for poverty, for inequality, right? It's so normalized, and we got to set up the revolution to change that norm. Next, I would like to ask Nadia to present her remarks. Please, Nadia.
Thank you so much. First, I want to tell you how I am so delighted to be with so amazing young girls activists. You made me coming back 14 years, where I was a young Moroccan girl, revolted by social injustice and violence against children and gender discrimination. I decided to act and to speak up. And since more than 14 years, I work closely with and for vulnerable children, boys and girls, victims of violence, exclusion, discrimination. And I learned a lot from them, from children, boys and girls, and young boys and girls, from their experience, perspective, and their creativity. And since I was promoting children and girls' rights, gender equality, combating all discrimination, including gender discrimination, These are part of my DNA. And in my work as special representative, I have consistently been emphasizing the gender dimension of violence against children and the way in which gender-based stereotypes, power imbalances, inequalities, and discrimination create different risks for children in normal situations, and even more so in the context of current pandemic. Furthermore, I have been drawing attention to the need to recognize the links between violence against women and violence against children and their intergenerational impact. Addressing gender inequality and discrimination should be at the core of the violence prevention and response. While girls were already at heightened risk of gender-based violence and discrimination before the pandemic, the current pandemic crisis undeniably had increased and created new vulnerabilities for them. There is currently a great risk that gains in the area of gender equality for the rights of girls will get lost and even reversed. With the closure of schools, disruption of services already weak, and severe socioeconomic impact of the crisis all over the world, girls, especially those already in vulnerable situations, faced increased risks of dropout of school, not accessing to remote learning because of not accessing to devices and internet, faced domestic and gender-based violence, forced and early marriage, teenage pregnancy, FGM, sexual exploitation and abuse online, while access to sexual and reproductive and mental health services, as well as psychosocial support, were severely restricted. As girls themselves explained in your research, only 5% of girls and young women consulted said that the pandemic had caused only positive effects in their life, indicating that in the majority of cases, COVID-19 has been very much detrimental to the lives of girls and young women. Together with some civil society organizations and with technical support from academia, we launched an initiative called #COVID-19 initiative, which is another initiative that aims at providing a space for children, boys and girls, including the most vulnerable, to express what they are experiencing during the pandemic. It aims to create spaces for children across the globe to be meaningfully involved in the discussion around the issues the pandemics had triggered and contributes towards shaping a post-COVID-19 world. In my work as special representative, I will continue to emphasizing the crucial role of girls as leaders and agents of change for leadership and as part of the solution to build back better a post-COVID world that is better for girls and for children. I do that through informing, listening, consulting, involving them, amplifying girls' voice, and helping bridge those voices with decision makers. Disseminating child and young people-led initiatives, civic engagement, making aware key stakeholders of this action in order to help channel child participation into policy influencing change. I just want to react to the girls' vision for a better normal, if you allow me. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for this inspiring and thought-provoking report that reflects the diversity of girls' voice and their collective vision of a better future as we will back better from the pandemic. The report highlights existing drawbacks, challenges, and inequalities faced by girls worldwide pre-COVID and those created or exacerbated by the pandemic. But it also brings hope as it strives to look at the bright side of the crisis and see it as an opportunity to demand radical transformation. This vision is indeed aspirational, but also achievable, as Mayela highlighted it. Girls, young women have very concrete solutions for decision makers how to create a better normal. There is a clear demand for equal access to quality and inclusive and innovative education, a clear demand for gender justice and fair treatment and inclusion of LGBTQA individuals, paying attention to the most vulnerable. Clear demand for protection of human rights, including protection from violence, abuse, and exploitation, and equitable distribution of resources and opportunities. Clear demand for inclusion and equality in power so that children, young people, girls, and disadvantaged groups are involved in decision-making at all levels. Clear demand from freedom to be human, and clear demand from climate justice. Recovery from the pandemic should be indeed an occasion to realize this vision of better normal and transform the development model of countries while promoting greater equity, gender equality, and safeguarding human rights in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic is an opportunity for governments worldwide to reassess priorities, advancing human development, reducing inequalities and discrimination, especially for children, girls, must be a major investment. This year, we commemorate 25 years since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the global agenda for advancing the rights and empowerment of women and girls. While gender equality is still far from reality, during the crisis we witnessed the power and resilience of girls and young women worldwide. This report is yet another manifestation how you are creating awareness, supporting each other, documenting your experiences, helping your communities, and suggesting innovative and concrete solutions. You are generations that is taking on the future, which makes it imperative for decision makers and government to listen and to be responsive to your concern about your future. See you as partners and critical agents of change as we build back better after the pandemic. I trust you strongly because you are key actors for positive change. Peaceful, just, and inclusive society, social justice, climate justice, sustainable and human development cannot be achieved without you. My mandate stands ready to continue this dialogue, to listen, to learn, to consult, to increase your visibility, to amplify your voices and help bridge them with decision makers in order to realize this vision of better normal, to make this dream becoming a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia. And our demands are very clear indeed, and we are willing to hold everyone accountable to have them deliver, as we need to accelerate the Beijing promise, right? We are 25 years already after Beijing, and there's still a lot to do. We have a question here for you, Nadia, from the girls. They submitted a question for you. Does the idea of a pandemic being a portal moment resonate with you? What do you think of girls' vision for a better normal?
As I just highlighted, I think that really since the beginning, during this pandemic, I was pushing and advocating to use this pandemic and the response and the recovery from the pandemic as an opportunity. And I think all these clear recommendations that they highlight to have education, but to have a new way of thinking education. It's not only about schooling, it's more than that. It's a kind of being more innovative, seeing children as actors also of their education, schools that are open to their environment, where creativity, innovation, participation, discussion, assessment, critical thinking is part of it. Linked it also education with training. This is very important, with sport, with recreative leisure. And also, you know what, it's really important regarding what is going on. Currently, education, we use a lot of remote education and remote learning. And I think it would be also a wonderful opportunity to make sure that we can break this digital divide, making children and girls worldwide in the remote areas, children who are the most vulnerable, from minorities who are not accessible, to have access to really this education through also remote learning, and to mix the both. This is very important. Regarding climate justice, I think we know, and Greta and all this big social movement that was done by children themselves is really important, and to push and to make states, governments more accountable regarding that. Regarding equality and equity, without building equity and equality and equal access to chances and to opportunities, we are not going to build just peaceful and inclusive society. Regarding, being, human, and I think this is wonderful, we, children, girls have dreams. And I think we need to dream. And we can also help and provide, empower the skills for girls, for boys, for LGBTs, really to have this dream. And the main point for me is that it's important, is currently a strong moment to review also the legislation, to make sure that they are based on human rights, on equality, but in the same time to make sure that all children, all girls, and those who are the most vulnerable have access to justice, to end impunity, to end corruption, to make criminals also accountable. This is very important, to make children more and more involved in decision-making process, not only having this kind of one-shot exhibition and forgetting them after, but I think it's important to systematize the participation of children and girls and young people really in all the decision-making process at local level and at central level. This is for me very important, and it is why I want to really congratulate all these young leaders. And I was in Mozambique, I was in many countries, you know, visiting, and I saw all the challenges you are facing, but you have so a strong, powerful resilience and creativity, and we need to listen to you. And I think it's really important as UN system, we can play the role of this bridge to channel, but please count on me on social mobilization. You make me today feeling more younger when I was, you know, 12 years old, and I started in my country, and it was not easy even, but what I learned in my life, you need to be resistant, you need to continue, you need to mobilize, you need to speak up, you need to build relays, and to make this visible and to make it as an ongoing process, because states make promise and they have to keep this promise. And I think it's important. And I want again to tell you many, many thanks for this wonderful commitment, and you can count on me.
Amazing, Nadia, thank you very much. It is important that you highlight the use of young people as token, and we are more than that. We want to be engaged in the decision-making process and be recognized as powerful agents of rights that we are. So our next question from the girls is for Rina Gnalani. How are you going to ensure there is a meaningful process for girls and young women to be involved in the recovery plans?
Thank you. It's a really good question, and the reason it's a really good question is there's a lot of words out there where, you know, in the UN and in all of the documents we read about equitable rights, there's a lot of great words. Unfortunately, they're words, and meaningful participation is where your question lies, in the word meaningful. You know, we're tracking in the UN the different actions taken by governments at the moment and whether they consider gender. And out of the sort of 1,500 odd measures that governments have taken, we've measured 195 countries around the world, and the measures that they've taken, 42% do have pay tribute to the words gender. They do actually consider gender. Now, when we measure the impact, you know, the problem is they use the words, but actually in application, they don't have an impact on gender. So the vast majority don't. And so again, it's about words. So your question about meaningful participation is so true. In the recovery process, we've said it over and over, if we do not have meaningful participation, and as you've said, Gisela, it's not just about listening to, it's actually being part of the decision making. We are going to fail. We are going to fail recovery. So I think we should go quite far on this. My organization certainly has put in measures itself. A lot of the United Nations organizations have, where if we do not, I mean, I think we just have to say it, if we do not have X number of young women at the table, then these programs won't get funded. Donors need to say it, we won't fund. We need to have very specific targeted programs at inclusion, So we, for example, we manage a lot of money, almost $1 billion in pooled funds. You know, these are general funds. And we've decided as an organization that we're going to channel this money into what is one of the biggest gaps, and that is around getting women and young women involved in things. We're actually going to focus our funding on those issues. So we'll need to have very targeted money put towards this. We're going to have women like yourself, young women like yourself, demanding it. I think we've seen with, as Najat mentioned, you know, we've seen with the climate change movement, it took young people, to make it a revolution, to be heard, to lead. It's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate in one way that my generation and above don't have the foresight to understand, but your generation does. And if you really demand it, you insist at every turn that you're at the table, we have a chance. I was looking at peace agreements because I work in a lot of countries with conflict. And in the peace agreements in 2019, there weren't so many, unfortunately. The world is not a happy place at the moment. But of the ones that were being negotiated and looked at, there were only 3% of women at the table. Only 3% of them had women at the table as mediators and negotiators. Now, we know that unless they're really at the table, unless women and young girls are really at the table, those peace agreements are not going to succeed. We've seen it over and over. And so to only be at 3%. So I do think it's positive action. Donors need to demand it with their money. They need to talk with their money. Young women as yourselves need to start a peaceful revolution, as you have with this document, and we can really together make impactful change. In the recovery programs, we absolutely need to unblock things. We have an unconscious bias, as we call it now. It's quite a popular language, and I think we all need to really, really understand that and unblock the things that prevent young girls from sitting at the table. And there's many of them. There's a lot of, some say cultural. I don't think it's cultural. I think it's a general problem across the globe, and we need to unblock whatever those obstacles are, which means engaging young women as yourself to tell us what those obstacles are, and which is what you've done. And we need to continue that. So there's a few ideas. I think it's hard. I think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be, it's going to really require all of us to scream and yell about it. And I think your report that comes out echoing and really giving prominence to the voices of young women is a great start.
Please, Nadia, you want to add something?
Thank you so much. Just to add very quickly on what Rina was telling, I think we are facing many challenges, to be very frank, even within UN system and within state members, to systematize child participation. As we heard and we understood what means child participation. It's not only about listening and informing, but what it's important is making them involved also in the decision-making process, in the monitoring and the assessment. And what we saw currently is that we have many initiatives undertaken by children themselves, and they are right to do it. And we have our role as UN, as civil society, is to bridge and to channel, to make sure that state members are aware about this action. We saw more and more children protesting outside, and they are arrested because of protesting for, social justice and so on. We saw more and more children as human rights defenders. And just to let you know what currently we are doing in my office, we are mapping and we are doing an assessment of all, the action and undertaking by children worldwide, mapping all that to disseminate it and to make it a really more visible and to influence the channel decision-making process. Another point, I think, it's not only about global level that we need to make sure, but local level and national level are really very important. Another challenge I think we need to face, we are facing, is how we are going to make sure that the most vulnerable children are really participating and engaged. And I think what we saw today, and thanks to you, I am sure that Mayela, Denisia, and many of you have many relays, and how we can continue this process, restituting, providing feedback, and really having this double way of information. Because it's, for me, it's a strong social mobilization led by children and young people, boys and girls, and we need to make sure that this social mobilization will continue to make sure that equality, equity, and human rights and women's rights and children's rights are really taken into account. Many thanks. Over.
Thank you, Naja. Thank you, Rina. Rina, what you said about being represented in such spaces is really valuable. Like only 3% of women, really? How are you expecting to give a right response for something if you don't include almost more than half of the population, right? And thank you, Naja, very much for input on the, including in the local and national levels. They are very important. So it's always important to empower girls to vote for women and to engage people who are very often marginalized in that spaces. And we are moving now to Fowen. She's taking the stage to present a few of a little bit of a really powerful content for us.
Thank you so much. So the first thing I want to say is that it's such an honor for me, a girl from Vietnam, to be here on this huge occasion to hand over the letter of 1,325 girls in 99 countries to you, to share their dreams and recommendations of what a better normal could look like. During COVID-19, lockdown measures and school closures affect girls and young women around the world, and will have a long-term negative consequences on hard-fought gun rights if we don't act promptly. Whether this pandemic could exacerbate the inequalities or an opportunity for you to reshape a just and sustainable future for all depends totally on our actions today. We called on the world to support our calls to action for a better normal through signing our open letter to member states. Thousands of people across the world from Australia, Bangladesh, Cameroon, Mozambique, New Zealand, Switzerland, and many more countries have shown their solidarity with girls and young women. This letter is our call on the UN and government leaders to compete both in words and action to center gender equality and girls' rights at the heart of the COVID-19 responses. Now let's listen to them, standing in solidarity to co-create a just and sustainable future for everyone.
To all members of the United Nations General Assembly, on the occasion of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly,
we are writing and speaking to you on behalf of girls and young women around the world who have shared their visions for a better normal.
Our pre-COVID-19 world undeniably failed girls and young women in all their diversities.
It failed to protect us, to empower us, and to listen to us.
The consequences of a global pandemic have compounded these failures.
Girls have been removed from schools and are unlikely to return. The divide between those with and those without is growing.
Weaknesses within health, welfare, and education systems have been revealed and deepened.
And girls and young women have been exposed to heightened level of domestic and family violence,
with increased levels of child, early, and forced marriage and unions.
Our research shows that young people are hearing, seeing, and experiencing these challenges.
But we also know what a better world looks like. And we know that a better world is possible.
Girls and young women from 99 countries around the world shared their dreams with us.
They dream of a safety and freedom, of security and agency, dreams of a life centered around passion and peace, not just work and productivity.
They are dreams of a sustainable future with respect for the land passed down from generation to generation.
A future that empowers and centers Indigenous voices in the fight for conservation.
And they dream of centering marginalized voices in policy and decision making.
These dreams are aspirational, but they are also attainable.
We have identified these changes, policies, and initiatives
that will help achieve our collective vision of a more equitable, peaceful, and hopeful world.
We are speaking to you as leaders and power holders
to ask that you consider our recommendations and work with us to transform our societies,
so that together we can build a better normal.
In solidarity.
So today you have heard from youth delegates from Mozambique, Vietnam, Australia, and Brazil. You have heard the calls of thousands of girls and young women across the world. We have the solutions to a future where our rights are upheld and we are empowered to the change makers we are. What will you do with this? And now I would like to give the floor to Plan International CEO, A.B. Albrechtsen.
Thank you so much, Chuing, for handing me the floor, and thanks for making the demands and the wishes and the dreams of young girls come alive. I really want to thank everybody who attended today for giving us hope, for inspiring us, and for shining a light on not only the pre-existing inequalities, but the compound inequalities that are happening during the COVID-19 period, but also showing us a way out of there. I have some very, very specific asks of everybody that's listening today, but actually also some very specific asks of Najat, of Rina, of Julie, and to I have a suggestion to you, because I know a little bit about the environments in which you all work. So Najat, you occasionally sit in the senior managers meeting with the UN Secretary General and everybody else around the table. Take this video and show it to them. And Julie, as an ambassador, you sit in ambassadors meetings where you think about what are the next tactics that you need to do. Take the video with you, show it to the other ambassadors. And Rina, you turn up with your passion time and time again in the various coordination mechanisms of the humanitarian space. Please take this video with you. That would be phenomenal. Just share the voices of girls, because the primary ask that I have of everybody is we need to listen to and allow ourselves to be led by girls. It's fine to say that we're listening, and sometimes during events like this, we're both forced to and we're encouraged to, but are we actually giving them a seat at the table? Are we making sure that that voice is included in the conversations and as part of decision making? This is the big barrier that we need to overcome. I popped in the chat box that perhaps what a part of the UN like OCHA needs is a permanent standing focus group of girls and adolescents that reviews appeal documents, that looks at how donor money is coming in, because we know donor money is not coming in for girls and women. And that's my second ask, to really make sure that every donor that might be on this table that's funding humanitarian responses, recovery efforts around COVID-19, that you go beyond the words, that your money is specifically targeting the organizations that work with and are led by girls, that have listened to girls, that have designed programs that are gender and age sensitive, and that really work with girls in all their diversity. So that was my second ask. And the third ask that I want us all to take to heart is really now's the time to look beyond COVID at that world that the girls have laid out for us and that we all want to build. Girls and young women are just no longer accepting the lives that they have been living before, and certainly not under COVID-19. We are looking not at a micro step, we are looking at a revolutionary reset, and we have the opportunity, we have the promises of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now's the time to look beyond and build a better future for all girls and young women and everybody in the world. Thank you so much for being part of our event today. Back to you, Giselle, who you've been a phenomenal moderator, and thanks, of course, to Denisla, Mayela, and Pyong for your excellence.
Thank you very much, AB. I would like to endorse all of your requests and say that this video is really powerful. It gets me emotional and I feel completely represented. You all, if you want to share, if you want to use it in a high-level political meeting, please do, because it represents our lives as young activists. And to finalize our event today, I would like to thank everyone on behalf of Plan International. And as a young activist, I want to thank Plan for putting up this event, both pieces of research, and for being such an amazing platform to women and girls around the world. Just a quick last request for everyone attending today. When leaving the meeting, a question will pop on your screen. Please kindly share with us your commitments moving forward. As AB said, the moment it's now. So we have a very powerful meeting with a lot of information, a lot of data, and most important, real stories, experiences, faces of young people out there facing all these issues. And we do not want this conversation to end here, right? So this is just the start for the better normal. Thank you, everyone.